Roll call for Thursday. This is February what? 2nd. Ag meeting.
Representative Alleman.
Present.
Representative Allred.
Here.
Representative Banks.
Here.
Representative Conrad.
Here.
Representative Craigo.
Here.
Representative Davis.
Here.
Representative Slagle.
Present.
Representative Winter.
Here.
Chairman Eklund.
Here.
Thank you.
The first bill for our consideration is House Bill 222, Colorado River Advisory Committee. The bill sponsor is here and he's almost ready. When you are, Speaker Sommers, come on up.
Thank you. The state engineers.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Chairman, fellow committee members, I bring you House Bill 222 and ask for your favorable consideration. So as you've all read in the papers and discussed and seen around that there's a lot of issues revolving around the Colorado River and the compacts and how all of this is going to play out in the 7 states as we have a declining water source, basically declining hydrology. And so the governor put together a Colorado River work group a couple of years ago. That's kind of my memory about when it happened. And that work group was really defined as a group that was supposed to disseminate information back to constituencies that were on that board. And then eventually it has evolved in, I believe, into more of as much as anything, an advisory board. And so I want to formalize what currently exists. And so what you see before you is that. There's like one difference in the committee. Conservation districts wanted somebody on there that represents them because they deal with water in all of those areas. So basically, if you go through this bill, you're just going to see where committees created. How it will meet. I guess I could go the purpose. If you go on page 2, we create 4111-302 subsection B. The purpose of the committee is to advise and inform the governor, the state engineer, and the Wyoming's commissioner to the Upper Colorado River Commission regarding the beneficial use, development, protection, and conservation of water from the Green and Little Snake Rivers and their tributaries to the Wyoming's rights and obligations under the compact. And then you go on through and you'll see how the makeup is. On page 3, you'll see the start of the makeup of the board. And a lot of this bill was handed to me by the chief executive. There are some noted changes where I merged language from my original bill into this bill. But there's not a lot of difference. And probably on 6, and you're going to see maybe that where the I guess the executive branch may have some challenges. I don't know. It would be on page 6. And if you go into subsection B, I go to safeguard the rights and interests of Wyoming's agencies and Wyoming's residents related to the state engineer, related to related to the waters of the Colorado River system. I'm using the state engineer's copy, which is red line, so that's struggling a little bit here. Related to the waters of the Colorado River system, the state engineer shall seek advice from the committee before exercising his authority for Colorado River Compact compliance. And they may have some changes. I haven't seen their changes, haven't talked to them about it. And so I don't know how I feel about them. But basically, that is the bill in a nutshell. In the end, if you go back to page 8, it puts in one full-time position basically it puts in one full-time position basically to help run this and to help work on issues related to the Colorado River. So it'll help with this committee, which has already become a burden, I believe, on the agency. Frankly, there's too few people in the state engineer's office related to the Colorado River, probably in fact related to a lot of areas. But we need more personnel, not less, in that office right now. And ultimately, I'll tell you, if the compact is ever tripped and we go into curtailment, they'll have to double the size of their office to handle the water regulation that would occur in my county and in Representative Davis's county. So it would be yeah, you're good. So anyway, Mr. Chairman, that's the bill. I'm just trying to put into statute what we're doing and more formalize the fact that, and the reason I'm bringing this is I think we need to formalize that the water users in the basin, in the Colorado River Basin in Wyoming, that they have a seat at the table when it comes to making decisions. We're not saying we make the decision, but we need a seat at the table. And I think this is the way we get it done. Any questions?
Questions for Representative Summers? Representative Conrad.
Chairman Eckel, thank you. Speaker Summers, thank you as well. And obviously representing you in a county which is extremely large component of this concern as well as it relates to Colorado River. It's my understanding that other states are doing the same thing. Is that correct in terms of appointing a specific, or more importantly, a board or a member or a group to manage, more importantly, to effectively, for lack of a better word, combat the threats that we're seeing?
Mr. Chairman, most other states have some kind of committee around that. You know, the Utah recently created a Colorado River Authority, which is the bill I originally drafted. Colorado has a multitude of committees. You know, I've even heard recently that they're dialing those committees back. I don't know exactly how they're doing that. Maybe they had too many committees. I think there is a balance between too many committees and at least having one committee. And so that's what the idea behind this is, Mr. Chairman.
Follow up?
Follow up.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Speaker Summers, this is essentially, if I understand correctly from a conversation yesterday, this would really codify what we have already in place and put more formality to it. Is that fair to say?
Mr. Chairman, this basically codifies what we have today and make it explicit that we are an advisory group and that the state engineer needs to seek our counsel, the water users in the area.
And it also adds a position to the
Yeah.
state engineers.
Frankly, I think you could add 2 positions.
Okay, we'll discuss that, I think, when we get there. Representative Davis. You're good? Oh, you're all right. Any questions, committee? Thank you. If you've got time, just stay up there.
So, Mr. Chairman, I got to go.
Okay.
Um,
I can't
sorry.
imagine you're busy.
Yeah, I've got to go. And, you know, the state engineer will have comments. You guys are most of you are all cowboys, so you'll sort through the riffraff and decide what you want to do.
Okay, thank
And
you, sir.
thank you. And thank you to the state engineer's office for handling a very difficult task. This has been challenging.
Mr. Gephardt, State Engineer's Office can come on in and weigh in. We are privileged to have our state engineer here due to the wind yesterday that closed the highways to to places he was supposed to be.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, good morning. Brandon Gephardt, State Engineer. Appreciate the ability to be here. We did switch out what we were going to do virtually and in person, so this works out better for us anyhow, so keeps us off the roads. Mr. Chairman, I handed out a strike underline version of some of the changes that I ask you to consider. The changes in that strike underline do not intend to change the context of the bill. It is only changing the language that will help it internally be consistent with the documents of the law of the river and try to remove some potential ambiguities and some conflicting language. So that was the only intent of what I'm providing today. And Mr. Chairman, I can certainly step through those suggestions if you would like. So, Mr. Chairman, the first one is on page 2, line 23, and it's just changing, deleting the Colorado River system and replacing it with water within Wyoming's portion of the Colorado River Basin. The next one is on page 3, line 2. The original language that I'm proposing to strike is of the Colorado River system under the law of the river, and replace it with under the Colorado River Compact and the Upper Colorado River Basin Compact. And then the next suggestions are on page 6, starting on line 7. Deleting waters of the Colorado River system and replacing it with use of water within Wyoming's portion of the Colorado River Basin. Then same page, line 9, excuse me, changing for Colorado River Compact compliance to as may be necessary to comply with Wyoming's obligations under the Colorado River Compact and the Upper Colorado River Basin Compact. Very similar changes to the previous ones. And then I believe the final suggestion on page 6, line 11, just putting in a little belts and suspenders, talking about executive session, and then just adding in that those discussions are privileged and confidential. And Mr. Chairman, that was it for my suggestions.
Committee questions? Representative Winter.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a couple of questions, Mr. Gephardt. In that last change that you just mentioned, you said it's privileged and confidential. And could you explain why that is?
Mr. Chairman, and I may phone a friend, Chris Brown with the AG's office, but the intent of that is we don't want to make legal strategies publicly known. Things like legal strategies or things that are sensitive that we do not want to make public was the intent of that executive session and keeping that privileged and private.
Follow up. I guess maybe it's too early in the morning, I don't know, but I don't quite understand why that's important to keep that secret.
I might phone a friend if that's all right, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Brown, come on up.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, my name is Chris Brown. I supervise the water section of the Attorney General's office. And as Speaker of the House mentioned as he was sitting here, the tremendous amount of uncertainty that's going on with the river right now because of the dire hydrology that's been going on for the last 22 years. If you've been paying attention to the Southwest newspapers, plans were submitted just 2 days ago. Well, 2 days ago and then 1 day ago from California. There's a lot of unresolved issues. There are a lot of legal issues associated with the Colorado River and the compacts that the states still have to work through. A lot of legal positions that the states can take or perhaps not take. And our position is it's very important to make sure that we are aligned as a state. And we try to stick with the upper division states as well. That's where some of our best sources of influence in the river, if you will, is if the upper division states can stick together. And so we feel it's very important as we communicate this information to folks that will be on this advisory committee to share as much information as we can. But if we're sharing documents, and Representative Davis knows when I'm given presentations about the Colorado River, it's best to use documents because it's so complicated and so difficult to explain. We try to share some things, but I think our ability to share some things and also protect our legal positions will be chilled if some of those things come out in the public before we're able to fully kind of get to a resolution with regard to some of those outstanding questions. Some of these pieces of the law of the river have been in place for 100 years, and there's been arguments about it for 100 years. And so those legal issues have yet to be resolved, and we still work on them today to try to get them resolved. And we feel it's very necessary to protect those legal positions until we get to the point where we can get them resolved, so that we don't spawn litigation on this very difficult and complex subject.
Representative Winter, go ahead.
Just to follow up, I had another question on the, could you explain or how big this Colorado River Basin you're talking about is? I wish we had a map so we could understand it better, but could you give some kind of idea what kind of area we're looking at, especially for Wyoming?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Winter, our portion of the Colorado River Basin is the Green River Basin and the Little Snake River Basin. That is about 1/5 of our land area in the state. It has about 600,000 valid permits, water right permits. Of that, about 300,000 we estimate are active. But it is a significant portion of our state. We estimate that the snowfall and the water supply in Wyoming contributes 15 to 16% to the Colorado River Basin. And the Colorado River Basin includes the states of Wyoming, Utah, Colorado, New Mexico, Arizona, Nevada, California, and also the country of Mexico. So it's a very big deal.
Mr. Chairman, put a little more context in just a kind of a big picture view. The estimates are that the river serves the 5th largest economy in the world as it goes down and serves Wyoming all the way down into the country of Mexico. It serves as a source of drinking water for over 40 million people, including Los Angeles, San Diego, Phoenix, Las Vegas, Denver, City of Cheyenne. It is the source of irrigated agriculture water for almost 6 million acres of irrigated agriculture. It is a huge issue with huge impacts all the way from the headwaters in Wyoming and Colorado, all the way to the country of Mexico.
Representative Banks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Because that's such a big area that sustains and supports a lot of people, going back to this privilege and confidential thing, don't we think that those who these decisions affect their water right shouldn't be kept in the dark of what's going on with decisions and things that are going to affect their water right and their ability to have sustainability on the river?
Mr. Chairman and Representative Banks, yes, and part of the reason why that's in there is that it gives us a greater opportunity to share that with the folks on the committee, so that the state engineer, the executive branch, can take those views into consideration as we try to navigate this huge and complex problem. Without those provisions in there, it's going to chill our ability to share that information for fear that it's going to get some of our legal strategies out. So the reason for putting that in there is to give Mr. Gebhardt and the state a greater opportunity to share more information with members on that advisory committee without fear that that information might get out to other states that would do with it what they will. That's the point of putting that in there, so that we can share information with the advisory committee.
Representative Conrad.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I'd just like to echo, more importantly, reiterate what's been already been said. The advisory board has done a tremendous job, specifically in Southwest Wyoming, keeping us apprised and communicated to as a result of actions and or strategies or impacts that it may personally have upon our ranchers and our agricultural group within our respective communities. So I would encourage you, if you don't already know who those folks are on that advisory board, they're extremely well received and an advocate for working through this state engineer's office, as well as keeping us apprised as local constituents and or communities on what's transpiring without disclosing, obviously, the strategies moving forward or publicizing them, et cetera. Thank you.
Thank you. A question I would have, so we have one position added to this, in the bill, to the state engineer's office. It's been indicated that if things deteriorate any worse down the drainage, and we don't know, we're in good look to be a brighter future right now with the snowpack. Is one position adequate for your office? Would you use two of them just to work on the Colorado River issues?
Mr. Chairman, I would never turn down additional employees, especially with what's going on. We've also, in the supplemental budget, there is an additional employee as well for things with the Colorado River Basin. And then we've also got one that is unfilled at this time for a modeling position that we're trying to fill. We're going to make some changes to that advertisement and try to get that filled. But we're always in need of people. The right people and what they are is still being developed. We fully anticipate that as things heat up, there will be a significant demand for resources. I think as Representative Summers mentioned, if we go to curtailment, a lot of the boots on the ground will be needed out in the basin. So we are always thinking about what kind of staffing we're heading towards. We estimate that in our curtailment that we would need to probably double the hydrographers and commissioners that we have in the Green River and Little Snake Basin. That's to deal with the administration of a curtailment. But we are, quite honestly, we are quite busy with the staff that we have. I don't want to be greedy because I haven't thought about what that next position would be. But I could guarantee we would find a use for additional people. There's always something we can do. I just hadn't put the thought to it yet. I put a little thought to this position, what it would be, but more people we can certainly use, yes.
So the addition is in the budget bill, the addition of one employee there. And then this would add one more employee besides that one, correct?
Mr. Chairman, that is correct.
So you would have two. All right, that's what I needed to know. Committee, any more questions? Okay, hang on. Don't mess me up here. Thank you, and we need more testimony, or is there more testimonies, what I should ask? Welcome, Ms. Little.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, my name is Kelly Little. I'm with the Wyoming Association of Conservation Districts. I wanted to let you all know that WACD is supportive of this bill. We appreciate Speaker Summers including a member on the advisory committee from the conservation district world. You know, we think as the on-the-ground experts in watershed management that it's really important to have that voice, and we support the bill. So I'll stand for questions.
Questions, committee. Thank you,
All right,
Kelly.
thank you.
Other testimony? Yeah, Mr. Winnie.
Mr. Chairman, Bill Winnie, Sublette County. Of course, I support Speaker Summers' bill. It is my understanding, as I've done some homework, that Colorado River Compact set up 100 years ago was set up when the river was at a far higher flow rate. And so the allotments were somewhat bigger. I've also found that in research that Wyoming hasn't really been using the entirety of its allotment. And given that, and this kind of links back to the issue of keeping information under your hat that you were just talking about, probably going to wind up in court. And our lawyers don't want to end up tipping their hand before they have to, so the other guys don't know what's going on. So that's the method to that madness. I'd also note that over the years, I've had conversations with Commissioner Joel Bausman, who has wanted to set up some more impoundment or damming of water there along the Green River in Sublette County. Never seemed to get any traction, but maybe there'd be something Speaker Summers would be interested in. Subject to your questions, thank you.
Questions, committee? Thank you. Any further testimony? Okay, we'll close testimony. Committee, what's your pleasure? Now, it's time now.
Move the bill.
Moved by Representative Davis, seconded by?
Second.
Okay. Conrad, discussion on the bill. Yes, Representative Davis.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to amend and put in the corrections here, the changes provided to us by the State of Wyoming engineers.
Okay. Any discussion? That's been moved and seconded? Moved by Davis, seconded by Craigo. Any discussion on those changes, suggested changes that you have in your bill? And the state engineer went over those. I guess we're ready to vote on that amendment. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, that amendment passes. You have a copy of this, okay. More changes, more discussion? Yeah, Representative Davis.
Mr. Chair, I'd just like to say what the State of Wyoming is doing right now has been an outstanding effort in keeping the state informed on this compact. You know, I've been following it for a couple of years. You guys are doing really good work out there. So I think this is just another step closer to ensuring better and a better response from the State of Wyoming.
Oh, Representative Conrad.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I just reinforce what Representative Davis has already said. This is an unbelievable issue. And as I campaigned this year, more importantly, I guess last year, this was the #2 issue on the minds of our UNT County residents. I've been involved with it from a number of perspectives, both professionally and personally on this whole issue with the Colorado River Compact. I cannot thank, more importantly, acknowledge the work that this outfit has done, specifically in addressing our community in the Bridger Valley. It's just been phenomenal. But I will share with you, my personal perception is this is one of the largest threats to our economy in the state of Wyoming. So thank you publicly for your efforts. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Any further discussion? Sensing we're ready to vote, roll call.
Representative Allemand.
Aye.
Representative Allred.
Aye.
Representative Banks.
Aye.
Representative Conrad.
Aye.
Representative Craigo.
Aye.
Representative Davis.
Aye.
Representative Slagle.
Aye.
Representative Winter.
Aye.
Chairman Eklund.
Aye.
9 ayes, 0 no, do pass with amendments.
Okay, the next bill for our consideration is House Bill 271, College of Agriculture Endowment. And Vice Chairman Craigo will walk us through the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, fellow committee members. Barry Craigo, House District 40. I bring to you House Bill 271, College of Ag Endowment. So just a little bit of background. I am a graduate from the UW College of Ag. I went on eventually, as you all know, to the law school. And so This is an issue that's near and dear to my heart on top of being a graduate. Ag's where I grew up. I may have a law degree, but my heart's in agriculture and always will be. The University of Wyoming is our land grant university in the state. And because of that, it has a mission. And one of the objects or one of the parts of that mission is to support agriculture. And I think this bill gives us an opportunity to further that mission and really allow us to become one of the premier agricultural institutions in the West. I'm not saying we don't have a great ag college now, because I think we do. We have some really great people over there that work for the state and on behalf of the state. And they have a big job. It's really the only college, in my opinion, over there that extends beyond the campus. They have all these other jobs that they do, whether it be extension, research. They run the research facilities, the farms, the ranches, etc. And what I want to do is help them do that into the future by creating a savings account. We call it an endowment, but it's really a savings account. And so I want them to be able to have the resources necessary to do what I just said, which is make us a place where young men and women like my daughter that's sitting in the back of this room want to go to learn their trades, learn how to support agriculture going forward. And so I'll walk you through the bill at this point, Mr. Chairman. On page 2, at the beginning, at the very top, on lines 4 through 6, that's where we create the endowment, the savings account for this particular project. Part B is where the income account is created, and the income account is where all of the earnings from the endowment will roll over to and be available for the College of Ag to expend on their projects. And we'll get to what kind of projects they can actually expend the money on here in a minute. And one important thing about that is, and this is up, we as a committee can decide this, we as the legislature can decide this, but as it's set up now, I tried to keep this as simple as possible. A lot of these endowment bills we get are 50 pages long, and I tried to keep this one simple so that so it's simple for all of us to understand. This one does not have a spending policy built into it per se. I mean, it does, but it's a very simple one, which is just all of the earnings on the account on an annual basis go into the spending account, into the income account and would be available. I think as the corpus grew through, whether it's additional grants, whether it's private funding that's, donations, gifts, etc., are given to the university to be put in that endowment, we may look at how that spending policy could change, but at this point, we would not have enough money in there to do a whole lot of good unless we allow them to use all the income. If you go to page 3, there's parts, under part subsection D, 1, 2, and 3. Those are really some sideboards on how the university has to use the money. In other words, they can't supplant the money from, for example, the university would not be able to say, well, the College of Ag is getting $2 million off the income from this endowment and then subtract that from their general block grant appropriation. And so that I put some language in there to make sure we're not just trading out money. We're actually serving a purpose above and beyond what the block grant would do. And I think that's important for all of us to understand, especially when we get to the floor and we start having discussions about how this money will be used. And then I think if we turn to page 4, and this is actually probably the most, other than the money, this is the most important part of the bill, and it's at the bottom and under 21-16-1206, a newly created provision. But starting there on Romanet I, we put in language regarding what exact programs this can be used for. And so it says academic programs that support Wyoming's agricultural industry and are consistent with the original intent of the University of Wyoming's land grant mission, including ranch management, range management, livestock production, crop production, and agricultural economics. And below that, then also I've listed the University of Wyoming Extension, the State Vet Lab, the experiment stations. And then below that, there's some more broad language regarding instruction and resource materials, classroom equipment, and then also faculty. But both of those have to relate to the other things listed above. So it's very narrowly tailored for what the money can actually be used for, what programs it can be used for. I'm open for suggestions if we think we've missed something in that list. That's just what I came up with. But that's open for discussion. If somebody on the committee or when we get to the floor thinks, oh, we forgot this particular program or we forgot this one or that one shouldn't be in there, I think we can talk about that. This is just a starting point. And we're going to have folks, I think, from the university here to talk to us a little bit too, and they may be able to answer questions or have some ideas on how we could improve that language because they weren't necessarily involved in the drafting. And so they may have some ideas to make it better. Turning the page 6, the university is going to be required to report what they're doing to us as the Ag Committee, and then also to appropriations, and also seek our recommendations on how that money should be spent. And then, of course, turning to the last page, the appropriation for this into the endowment's $50 million. That again is a placeholder. If the committee wants it to be something else, that's up for discussion. We picked that number, or I picked that number, I should say, simply because it is a savings account. Any number that's much smaller than that, we're not going to be giving them much resources to actually do a whole lot, because we're only, even if we say we're earning 5% on that, that's $2.5 million annually. That's not a ton of money to do what I really want to see done over there, which is start attracting more and more kids to the Ag College and grow the college and grow the enrollment, so that it's a destination for people. And it's the hallmark of our college. It should be the hallmark of our college. It should be the hallmark of our university, I should say. The College of Ag should be in my opinion, humble opinion, that's what people should look to and say, hey, we have the best College of Ag in the Western United States, and maybe this gets us there. And that's what I'm trying to do today. And so with that, I would stand for questions, and I'm sure there's some of them that I may not be able to answer, but I know there's some good folks behind me that would be willing to help me.
Questions, committee. Representative Conrad.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Question to Representative Craigo. Is there an opportunity, as we look at page 5, with regards to the, applicability, or more importantly, the programs that are affected or impacted, is there a way to form some sort of a conduit for, or more importantly, to the Wyoming agriculture in the classroom that begins in the 4th and 5th grade of our respective communities?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Conrad, I'm sure that'd be a good question for the folks behind us, whether we could make that work. I'm not opposed to that. I love that program. I think it's very important. And so if there's some way we could work that into this without, causing too much trouble, I'm up for that suggestion.
Mr. Chairman, follow-up question. Thank you, Representative Craigo. And with that preface, I'll look forward to their diligent studying prior to them coming to the podium here. Thanks.
Representative Craigle, I love the idea of all of this, but I'd like them to come back every year and ask us for money instead of putting $50 million once again in a coffee can. I will probably vote yes out of committee and see what happens on the floor, but I think we got too many coffee cans now. Thank you.
Representative Winter.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Craigo, would rodeo fit into this opportunity for the Ag Department?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Winter, probably, I would say not directly. I mean, it's not encompassing sports, but in my experience, because I also was rodeoed at the university, most of those kids end up in the Ag College. And not all of them, but most of them do. So is there a secondary benefit for the rodeo team? Probably. But it doesn't really run through the College of Ag per se. And so it's not listed in there. I mean, again, I do not take pride in or ownership of this bill. I want it to be our committee bill. I think this is an Ag committee issue. And so if somebody has suggestions, let's try to work them in there, or if ideas to make it better. I just want to, if I may, Mr. Chairman, respond to Representative Alaman's point about the coffee cans. I don't necessarily disagree about the coffee cans, but the difference is this is one we have a say in how the money gets spent. And it goes to an issue that I think is important to all of us on this committee directly. I mean, it affects all of us on a daily basis. That's why we're on this committee. And so the way that the bill is drafted, they will come and ask us for recommendations on how to spend that money. And we do get a say in that. That's the idea of the bill, is that it comes here, we get to make recommendations. Hey, we'd like to see this happen. We'd like to see this happen. And they have to report to us how they're spending the money. It's not without some oversight.
Couple questions. I'd have do we have an idea of this income account or this savings account? What the interest would be? Is it going to be kind of like our permanent mineral trust fund? I'm guessing that it's a lot of money, even though it's very little money in the scheme of our savings. But it is a savings account to the state of Wyoming. Do you have any idea how that would be? It wouldn't be a 0.5% or something like that. It'd be a greater account than that. Do you have any ideas on that, or will we find out when we go to appropriations? Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I think we can work that. We can decide where we want to put that money. We can build that into this bill, and we can talk to our good friends on the top floor about that when it goes, if it comes out of here, obviously we'll have to go up there and talk to them about the bill. And I think they could help us make that call. And they have much more expertise than I do in where we put the money and what kind of interest we can make it earn.
Okay. And I'd respond a little bit to Representative Allemand and your concerns. There's a lot of money in the state, and it's managed by a lot of people besides the legislature. We're the appropriators. And so this would be one of the choices we would have, or to whether to have this endowment as a permanent savings account within the university. If we came back and researched and talked everything, all the money, then the whole legislature would be kind of like the Appropriations Committee. We'd have to meet much more than we do. I mean, we're going to have trouble finishing the bills that we've started, but at some point in time, we have to turn money over to people that we trust and leave it at that. That's kind of what I've got to say about, but I do appreciate what you're saying, Bill. Representative Davis.
Mr. Chair, Mr. Representative Craigo, could you lead me a little bit down your vision on the recruitment and retention of faculty? And to me, that we see far too often top heavy down, and I'm just a little. Could you just lead me down there? Explain that just a little bit more, please.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Davis, sure. So my thought in that language is this: if we want to be a destination for kids wanting to take on range management occupation or ranch management occupation, we need good teachers. We need good professors. In fact, we need the best. And I want the best. I want our kids learning from the best and the people that we deem are the best, right? That fit our culture, that fit our industry. And that was the idea with this, is we want to be able to recruit and retain the top end professors. And I'm not saying we don't now. I think we have, as I said, I'm a graduate over there for 2 different times, and I think we do have good professors, but I want to be able to keep them, and I want to go after the next best in line and that takes money. The best don't go where they're going to make less money typically. We need those resources to go after those people. And if we go after them and we stand up some of the best programs available, we're going to recruit kids from all over the country to come to Wyoming and get a good agricultural education.
Follow-up.
Wouldn't that normally be the objective of the College of Ag to have the best? I would think that would be in the best interest of the university.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Davis, agreed. I'm saying we may need more resources to do that. I mean, I'm not sure we necessarily always have enough money in that particular college to do what I'm wanting to do. And so I want to add on top of that, cherry on top of the sundae, if you will. I want to make sure we have those resources available, which means money, to do exactly that. We don't always have that ability, the way it's structured now.
And I guess one of the things I would add to that, some of the sharpest students that I've known in my area have looked at other universities. Cornell was one, and K-State, they've got tremendous ag programs. And those kids went to places like that because the program just wasn't as strong at the University of Wyoming. And we still get good students, but it's oftentimes because their resources are limited and they need to stay in state and take the Hathaway Scholarship, which is a great deal. But I just see the need to find the best teachers we can find, and this bill may add that to it. Any further questions? Thank you. University of Wyoming, as many of you as want to come forward, and we'll have time to testify, so. Welcome, Dean.
Let's see. Thank you, Chairman Eklund and members of the committee for having us here today. I'd like first to introduce myself. I'm Barbara Asco. I'm the Dean of the College of Agriculture, Life Science, and Natural Resources. And with me here at the table is Kelly Crane, who's our Director of Extension. And in the back of the room here, if there are questions that might be more appropriately directed to them, we have our Director of our Agriculture Experiment Station, Eric Webster, our Vice President for Government Affairs and Community Relations, Mike Smith, and our Board of Trustee Chair, Mr. McKinley. So they're all here today, along with Pepper Joe Six, our Director of External Relations. So again, we're very excited about the opportunity that this bill would give our college to increase our service to the state, and the potential that this bill would provide for us to be able to increase our service to the state in terms of educational programming, applied research that benefits our agricultural and natural resource community, and then our extension programs and 4-H programs as well. We understand, and I'm sure that you do too, that Wyoming agriculture is very unique. We're in a high altitude environment. We have issues associated with public lands and private lands, energy development, and natural resource usages that many other states and many other agricultural colleges don't face. So we have the opportunity here with your support to be able to develop premier programs in agriculture, the type of agriculture that would support our state in livestock and crop production, ranch management, range management, agricultural economics, and then to support our R&E centers across the state, our vet lab, which is critical to our agriculture community, and then our extension programming. So our motto at our college is growing knowledge, people, and communities. And the support that we're talking about today is something that would really help move us forward at the college. So would be happy to take any questions. And then if Kelly has some things to add. What would you like to say?
Well, good morning, Mr. Chairman and committee members. And again, I'll just reemphasize our appreciation for your consideration in this. We're grateful, and it's really humbling because this is to have our college and really this kind of the specific production aspects that we do in our college, ag production called out in this bill. It's really encouraging. So thank you. And the bill sponsors, I want to commend them for the wisdom of, and what I see is really investing in the future of our college and of our capacity to serve the ag industry in Wyoming and rural communities throughout Wyoming. That's what it looks like to me, the bill, that it's a real investment in our capacity to serve Wyoming and an investment in future students like Lily Crago and many others who want to come to the university. And like Chairman Eklund mentioned, there are lots of options out there. But I really believe that through things like this bill, we can be the absolute best. We might not necessarily look like a Cornell or a K-State, but I think we can be the absolute best at production agriculture with a real focus on production and a real focus on serving the needs of Wyoming. And I think this bill is a real start to moving us along that way. So anyway, I just really appreciate that. I'd be happy to take questions on from any of you.
Representative Conrad.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Thank you sincerely for being here. Obviously, Representative Crago set the bar fairly high for other graduates in the future. Specifically, my question is a follow-up as it relates to the agriculture in the classroom. Does there exist a relationship now with the Wyoming agriculture in the classroom, obviously, which mission is to educate our young children, specifically grades 2 through 5, on those opportunities moving forward? The second part of that or follow-up is there a way to include this, a more respective conduit that we can encourage, endorse, and also promote agriculture in the classroom? Because it's one thing to obviously graduate, or more importantly, have students that are 17 or 18 to take advantage of the program. But I think the nucleus of that begins in those younger formative years, specifically grades 2 through 5, as is the mission of Wyoming agriculture in the classroom. Thank you.
Want me to take it?
Why don't you take it, Kelly? Yeah, go ahead.
All right, Mr. Chairman, Representative Conrad. So we do have a great working relationship with Wyoming Ag in the classroom. And typically, someone from our college has served on their board. And like you observed, we see them as a real positive recruiting pipeline, just like our 4-H program. And so that's probably where the relationship is the tightest, is in Wyoming communities where we have a 4-H youth development educator that works with ag in the classroom in schools. So I don't know if there's really a formal partnership there, but certainly in our communities, we work with them. As far as integration of that into the bill, we'd be happy to work with the sponsors on what that looks like, but they are certainly an important partner for us now.
Great, thank you.
Sorry. We have one of our committeemen that needs to testify, so. Any other questions? So I'm a graduate of the Ag College too, so I have quite a fondness for the university and in the lives of my family as well. We thought you might like this bill. Thank you. Thank you for coming before us. Other testimony?
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'm here today in a personal capacity. My name is Jody Levin. I have the pleasure of serving as co-chair of the advisory board for the College of Agriculture, Life Science, and Natural Resources. I'll let Shane introduce himself.
My name is Shane Schultz. I'm also a co-chair with Mrs. Levin. She's always the workhorse, and I guess I'm the eye candy. I'm not really sure what my role is, but I've been co-chairing it with her for a while, and it's been a pleasure to do it. And on behalf of the college, I also serve as a Council of Ag Research and Extension rep for the university, which goes and works on behalf of the college with another Carrot rep, as we're known, on federal matters to try and make sure those federal funds, Hatch Act, Smith-Lieber, we get a Steyer, I'm mixing up that act, but there's federal dollars that come in as well, and I serve on that capacity as well for the college.
So, Mr. Chairman, I'm a very proud graduate of the College of, at the time, it was the College of Agriculture. Of course, now the Life Sciences and Natural Resources component. On behalf of the advisory board, we just want to thank Representative Craigo for bringing the bill. It brings a lot of attention to the college. We're obviously very passionate. I share that love of agriculture. It has a big place in my heart as well. And the advisory board, again, extends its appreciation for this. We'd encourage you to support this bill. It's not only an investment in the university, but it's an investment in Wyoming's future, as was said. Agriculture is Wyoming's third largest economy. And so anything we can do to support that, whether that's, through something like this and additional resources to the university, we encourage you to do that. Thank you.
Representative Almond.
Mr. Chairman, as we discussed last night, I do have to go. Is it appropriate at this point for me to give a comment?
Sure, go ahead.
This is hard for me because I am agriculture. I'm going to have to vote no for it because I got people at home that can't pay their taxes. This $50 million would go a long ways for those people to pay their taxes. In a perfect world, we could all I'd like to give you 100 million. But at this point where my folks can't pay their taxes, I got little ladies that are going to be booted in a couple years out of their homes and going into nursing homes because of their tax problems. I don't want to vote no, but I am leaving and I have voted no. And I do apologize for that because this is my life. But thank you very much.
Thank you, Representative Almond. Any other questions? Well, I believe this bill would move us towards the level of Cornell and K-State. And so keep working towards that. I appreciate your work. Thank you. Other testimony?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, we got one more coming up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ken Hamilton with the Wyoming Farm Bureau Federation. We're supporting this bill because it moves us towards several of our policies where we want to try and enhance the College of Agriculture and the original idea of the College of Agriculture. I think there's a few really important parts of this bill, though, that I think is something that we need to reiterate. And one of the things, and Representative Craigo already talked about that, but he basically put the sideboards in here where the administration of the university can't come in and say, well, you've got a pot of money over here. We'll just take this money that we normally would give you out and give it to some other college. In my opinion, I think that the University of Wyoming has been guilty of that in the past, where the College of Agriculture has suffered because the money was filtered off to other colleges, if you will. And those colleges are certainly important. But I think the land grant mission of the university really particularly supports agriculture, and we need to emphasize that. So I think that's an important part of that bill. There's another part of this bill that I really like, and that's the focus on those aspects of the College of Agriculture that I've always felt are important, and that's on page 4 and page 5, because to us in agriculture, the University of Wyoming provides a valuable service, but sometimes I think there's a effort or a desire by others in the college and the university to filter those aspects away. And so I think it's important that we keep that part of that bill in there, because it's really something that we in agriculture are frustrated with when we look at the expenditure of the university And some of the money going to other areas are a little bit antithesis to agriculture. So it's important, I think, that we continue to focus on those range management aspects of it. I know that the University of Wyoming has gone through a reorganization and the College of Agriculture is expanding. And so at some point, we may want to come back here and look at other areas that they have taken on as those areas get integrated into the College of Agriculture. But at this point, I think that the focus should remain just exactly where it is. So, Mr. Chairman, unless there's any questions, that's all I have. I really appreciate the opportunity to come before the committee. Apologize, I haven't been here before.
Okay, committee, any questions for Mr. Hamilton? Thank you. Good to see you again.
Good to see you, Mr. Chair.
Further public testimony. We have someone online. When you're ready, Jim, go ahead, jump in.
Okay, well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Jim McGagin with the Wyoming Stock Growers Association, and also testifying on behalf of the Wyoming Wool Growers Association today. And my apologies for not being there with you. I would love to be, but another commitment has me out of state this week, so appreciate this opportunity. I believe that Mr. Hamilton reiterated some of the components of this that are so important to us, but what we see in this allocation is it's directed toward those programs that are the key to the future of agriculture in the state of Wyoming. And the College of Agriculture is in some ways unique among all the colleges and schools at the University of Wyoming, in that it has the extension program, which is out in every county and virtually every community in the state. It has the research centers scattered across the state. And what we've witnessed in the past decade or so is that the university and the legislature have strongly supported other programs at the university, some of those critical to the land grant mission, such as College of Engineering, with millions, hundreds of millions of dollars. And that was appropriate. We're not in any way diminishing that. But for those of us external to the college, it has felt many times like the College of Agriculture was the poor stepchild. And I don't believe that was intentional. It's because focus has been on some of the other areas. But as we're think about the critical role of agriculture, production agriculture in the state of Wyoming, not only for the food and fiber we produce, but for the maintenance of our vast public lands and private lands and the use of those in an appropriate manner. It seems very fitting that the college get some attention at this point in the process of building the university up to a high degree of excellence. And while we would not pretend that the creation of this endowment is the end game, it can be an important step because it assures some dollars that will be there with some certainty, that aren't dependent upon going before the central administration at the university every year and asking for a fair share of the dollars that they have to allocate across campus. It provides something that the college can build upon, that we can work with them on to assure not only that our extension work and our research continues, but that we're training the young people who represent our future, not only in managing and operating and owning Wyoming's farms and ranches, but in training the people that are going to be in the myriad of federal and state regulatory agencies that are so critical to the management of our public lands in the state. So we think this is a very important step forward. We like the focus that's in the bill. We think it is appropriate that and very satisfying that the Ag Committee will maintain a voice in how these dollars are spent through the annual reporting back to the committee. And that seems to be a good balance to create with making funds available, but certainly not the legislature giving up their responsibility for accountability. With that, we would strongly urge the committee to move forward with this bill. Be happy to entertain any questions, Mr. Chairman.
Questions? Thank you, Mr. McGagna. Any other testimony? Okay, we'll close the testimony. Committee, what's your pleasure?
Move the bill.
Been moved by Conrad,
Second.
seconded by Davis. Discussion on the bill? Representative Davis.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make an amendment to the bill.
Okay.
Okay, this, in my opinion, gives us an ample opportunity to draw light to and focus on the ag institution there at the University of Wyoming. So I would like to amend from 50 million to 100 million in order to draw attention from the public back to the original mission of what the land grant institution is about there. I mean, we're putting money forth, and I'm not a big spender, don't get me wrong here, but you know, this is the third largest economic driver in the state of Wyoming. You know, and it's getting larger every day. I mean, with the conservation easements, with the questions of conservation, even water out there. You know, these are all part of ag. Ag is the, what is it, the overseers of the state land. I mean, every man out there that has anything to do with ag. I just can't overemphasize it enough. So I'd like to make a motion to move it to 100 million. One time.
Been moved to change the appropriation to 100 million, seconded by Craigo. Discussion on that idea? Motion or amendment? Representative Slagle.
Mr. Chairman, I appreciate Representative Davis's amendment, but I looking at all the money we appropriated in our supplemental budget yesterday, I have a bit of a problem with this. And I mean, we do this unless we show where we're going to pull this other money from. I will be a no on this amendment and maybe even on the bill.
Okay, Representative Banks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I agree with my good colleague down there. I don't see how we can justify $100 million right now with all the spending that we've continued to increase. And don't get me wrong, I attended this program as well. And we can't say that the university's not well-funded. It's well-funded. And with my conversations, it's been a while since I've been there, so I called some friends, currently graduate students. They're not restricted. They don't feel restricted. They're able to do the research, the projects that they want to do. They feel that what they have is the best in the state. And so throwing another $100 million, $50 million at this time, as my colleague down here said, when we have other things that are struggling, I just can't justify it as well. So I'm also no on the amendment and probably on the bill.
Okay, any further discussion on the amendment? Representative Davis.
Mr. Chairman, at this time, I'd like to pull the amendment.
Okay, is the second okay with that? We'll pull that out. A reason to go in with $100,000 is I've been subject to the debates that'll go on in appropriations, and we'd had a little bit of leverage, but that's fine. We'll work on what we can and what the committee's comfortable with. Any further discussion on the bill? Okay, sensing we're ready to vote. Roll call.
Representative Allemand has left me a proxy vote. Representative Allred.
Aye.
Representative Banks.
No.
Representative Conrad.
Aye.
Representative Craigo.
Aye.
Representative Davis.
Aye.
Representative Slagle.
Aye.
Representative Winter.
Aye.
Chairman Eklund.
Aye.
Ayes are 7, noes are 2. To do pass.
Okay, thank you, committee. We're going to take a quick break. We're in pretty good shape, but it'll be a short one.
Cindy's up there having a big chit chat with Chairman Booker. She's still Cindy.
No, we can leave. It's all right. That's why we're having a break.
We're having a break.
know what the definition of what is it truly is.
I'm trying.
He's giving it a hard time, yeah.
Committee, gather up again and we will get going with our next bill. Huh? The next bill for our consideration is House Bill 130, Law Enforcement Canine Detection Grants, and our bill sponsor is here. When you're ready, Representative.
Thank you, Chairman and members of the committee. Good morning, Representative Rachel Rodriguez-Williams with House District 50. And this morning I present to you House Bill 130, titled Law Enforcement Canine Detection Grants. And if you'd like, I'd be happy to walk you through the bill.
Proceed.
Mr. Chairman, essentially what this bill does is it creates a new grant that would be managed through the Attorney General's office that would be used specifically for the purchase and training of fentanyl, single-purpose drug detection canines. And applicants of this grant would be specifically law enforcement agencies throughout the state of Wyoming. Ladies, members of the committee, I serve on Committee Number 1, Judiciary. And in the beginning of this legislative session, we received an update from DCI, the Division of Criminal Investigation, pertaining to the increase in illicit manufactured fentanyl that we're seeing throughout the state of Wyoming. And it is very, very, very not only alarming, concerning, but it is a lethal drug, and it is very dangerous when it comes to officer safety and the safety of our public. As retired law enforcement, I can tell you that I'm a firm believer in making sure that our law enforcement officers are fully equipped and that they have all the tools that they need to make sure that they can do their jobs effectively as they put their lives on the line every day to protect us. I believe that this is an adequate use of funds, specifically public safety, use of government funds. And what specifically this bill states is that as written, these grants are individually awarded in the amount of $300,000. I do believe that needs a haircut after further research, and I would entertain a motion from the committee to bring that down to $150,000 per an agency. An agency can only apply one time. The grants awarded under this act will not be available after December 31st of 2024. So this is a one-time deal, not an ongoing expense. And again, they would be awarded under the AG's office. And the total fiscal note is a minimal $4 million total. And I would stand for any questions from the committee.
Committee questions, Representative Craigo.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative, so would you be opposed, I'm just looking at this, the timeline, I know it's still a one-time expenditure, it's $4 million. I'm just wondering if we want to think about possibly, instead of making it the end of 2024, make it the end of 2025, just because that's gonna, some of these law enforcement agencies may not be ready right now to do that or jump forward. I don't know, what would your thoughts be on that, about just changing that from 24 to 25 and letting it extend into the, as it's drafted now, it's already going into the next budget session, next budget, because that terminates on June 30th of 2024. Just curious about your thoughts.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Crago, I am open to that idea. And I would probably defer to my key witnesses that'll be coming up to testify more about the benefits of this program and how they're used on the street.
Representative Conrad.
Chairman Eklund, a question, I guess clarifying question, and I apologize in advance. Representative Rodriguez-Williams, my question is, you mentioned the reduction on page 3 from 300,000 to 150,000, correct? Is it because you, I shouldn't say that, cannot spend the money, or you just don't have the, I guess, clarify, I don't understand why you reduced it.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Conrad, after further research, when I initially wrote this bill, my goal was not to eliminate agencies with new startup expenses. So if or prevent an agency from applying that currently does not have a dog. So when you think about a program, there's a lot of things that go into the initial start of a program, including having a vehicle that's equipped for the dog, having the supplies that are needed for the dog, the initial training, the handler training, et cetera. And my key witness can speak more to the details of the program, but I was a little over
Zealous.
yes, with that. And so I think 150,000 per an agency is more feasible, more conservative, and really can get the job done and more far-reaching throughout the state. I would like to see as many agencies be able to apply as possible. Again, this really is kind of getting ahead of the problem. We do have statistics available for the committee to talk specifically about the problem of fentanyl within the state, but I see this as becoming a larger problem and believe that law enforcement specifically needs this tool. So I'd like to see as many agencies be able to apply as possible.
Thank you. Follow up, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, thanks. And it was just counterintuitive to me, obviously understanding the real and present danger of fentanyl and the imminent issue it is, obviously, which will grow. I didn't want to detract from the effectiveness by reducing a certain value. That was my concern, not to spend more money, but I didn't want to detract from the overall mission or objectives in this if we had to reduce that. But that makes sense to me. Thank you.
This is out of the wheelhouse of this subject is out of, we know about dogs and animals, but fentanyl is a legal drug then in some cases. It's used as a pharmaceutical, is that correct? Or something?
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, correct. There is a legal version of fentanyl that is administered through a pharmacy and prescribed through a physician. However, what we're seeing as a result of the influx of narcotics that are being smuggled through our southern border is an increase in fentanyl throughout states, and specifically illicitly manufactured fentanyl. And it's being laced in several products, including candy, and it's lethal. And I would defer to my key witnesses to speak more about that.
Okay, any further questions? Thank you, Representative Rodriguez. My apologies for putting this bill back each time, but I'm glad we got to it. Thank you for your patience. Appreciate it much. Could we have you gentlemen come up and testify as well? I've got some questions. Curious about these dogs and what all they're trained to do. Proceed when you're ready.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Committee. Josh Walther, Lieutenant Colonel with the Wyoming Highway Patrol. Before I turn this over to our resident expert, just want to make a couple opening comments. This is, as a representative stated, this certainly is a serious issue we all combat as law enforcement. We definitely stand behind this bill. This is easy to get behind. We just really have a couple recommendations or requests. We don't want to take away from any other agency. As you notice in the bill, the state's missing. And I think that was just an oversight. A lot of people don't understand how our canines are funded. We do have a dozen canines. 10 of those are narcotics detection, 2 are explosive detection. And the majority of the funding is internally through our own budget. So we do have some outside sources, federal funding for roughly half of the narcotics detection canines. But that was really our request, is just to be considered in this bill as well. Anyway, without further ado, Lieutenant Josh Hardy is a lieutenant in our professional standards section. He's also a former canine handler and helps to coordinate and supervise our current canine team. This is his first time testifying too, so I just ask that you go a little easy on him.
All right, committee, we'll go easy on this, gentlemen.
With that, Lieutenant Hardy.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and committee. Again, my name's Josh Hardy. I have trained and handled a narcotics detection dog and explosives detection dog, and I've been doing that since 2009. Last 2 years, I've been supervising the canine team. I partnered with our canine trainer last year, and we committed to developing the first fentanyl canine in the state and doing it safely. Also one of the first in the country. There are others, but they haven't used our process. That was proven to be safe and effective. And now we have a national standard to back us in the court system. And I just wanted to lay a little groundwork, and I'm here to answer any questions you may have.
Questions, committee? So, yes, Representative Davis, go ahead.
That was going to be my question, is the athlete that you're using here, i.e. the dog, what is the risk for him and the handler, from, you hear everything you want under the moon about this, but, from if you're within 10 foot, if you touch it, so can you clear some of that up for me, please?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Davis, I can clear that up for you. So that was part of our process before we started this. Law enforcement has been leery about this, and there is some concerns about being in contact with fentanyl. Of course, I don't want to get near fentanyl like you're saying, but the cases that have happened are pretty rare where you're within a certain amount of area. It really has to get airborne, and there has to be some reason for it to get airborne. If there was a fentanyl pill sitting right here, that doesn't necessarily mean that something's going to happen to you. Now, if it gets in your skin, that's another thing. So you wouldn't want to touch it. So as we went through this process, we have specialized containers that have scientific backing from a large company that we use. And so we actually partnered with another company that does what's called vapor odor. And that also goes in a container. So it is a special little tube that is inside of a container that just emits the vapor of the odor of the actual real fentanyl. So that's safe for us to be around, safe for the dog to be around. So we purchased those and used that as part of our process to start implement and train the dogs. And from there, we knew we needed to use real fentanyl just for the court systems, because we train on real drugs for everything else: marijuana, methamphetamine, cocaine, heroin. So we knew we needed to do that with fentanyl as well. So I did go through a laboratory, get real fentanyl. I used the same container, and I used 200 milligrams of fentanyl. So it's in the same container, and that container releases vapor odor. It doesn't release any residual, so the dog doesn't get residual. We've done hundreds of repetitions with real fentanyl with our canine that we imprinted on this process and certified, and we had 0 issues. But just in case, I put practices in place to keep a barrier between the dog and the fentanyl, just in case, dogs paw and things like that. So I didn't want that to happen as a safety measure. So we
that it was successful and it was safe, and that's how we got our national backing. So that's part of the reason why I'm here today, is also for this bill is to set a standard for those agencies that want to do this, because I've been getting calls all over the world and the country about this and how we did it and how we did it safely. And I'm hearing stories of small agencies going out and just taking their fentanyl pills and putting them out and training their dog on it. That's a problem, because they're going out and now finding Tylenol and other things that are completely legal. And I'm not okay with that. So I don't want the program ruined. And that's why I'm here to make sure we set the proper standard for those agencies.
Representative Craigle.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Both of you gentlemen heard my question regarding essentially the termination date of the program, whether the end of 24 is long enough or whether we should give another year till the end of 25, just so that all of our local agencies would have, the ability to get in on this. A year and a half flies by rather quickly. I just didn't know if everybody applies at once, for example, and everybody's coming to, let's say you're doing a lot of the imprinting or training right here through your program, is a year and a half enough time to get it all done, or would it be better if we stretched that out another year and did it through the end of 25?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Craigo, I do agree with that. 2025 would be helpful. A year and a half may not be enough for some smaller agencies. It takes time to make those decisions, put those things in place, get vehicles, even just the hiring of people. Sometimes people don't want to, officers won't step up to do a handler position. So it may take a little time to identify your prospects for that position. So I think more time is better.
The dogs are specifically trained to fentanyl only, not other drugs, or do they detect other drugs? Are they trained to do both, or how does that work?
My recommendation here has been to a couple things, is not do just fentanyl, but do fentanyl and the other drugs that we already do now, the four I listed off earlier: marijuana, heroin, cocaine, and methamphetamine. The second part of that is any agencies out there that currently have a narcotics trained dog, it is easy to imprint and train fentanyl. So their request may be less. They don't need to do a brand new dog. They could do it with their current dog. And that may prove to be a little more, they'd be a little less apprehensive to start all over and then just train their dogs. But with that being said, they can use anybody they want, or they can do their own imprinting and training. I'm just asking, as we go through this process, that they use the same standards that we did when they get this grant.
Representative Banks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Lieutenant, I'll take it easy on you and ask you to describe the chemical composition of fentanyl. No, in the essence of time, I'll nix that question. So in here, it talks specifically about the purchase and training of the canines specifically. Do we need to include something about personnel as well, handlers that need to go through some type of training? Or is this just going to law enforcement agencies that already have canines and we are training them to be specifically for fentanyl? Or anybody can answer that question, I guess.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Banks, I think that a lot of officers are already dealing with fentanyl now. I don't think that there's necessarily any other change in precautions that they need to do when they're dealing with fentanyl. I don't use any sort of PPE or anything like that, protective wear. Definitely gloves, we use that. But with the process that we use, you don't have to be in a hazmat suit or anything like that. There's no danger to us or our dogs unless for some reason the actual real fentanyl container got destroyed and that stuff went to the air. I don't know if I mentioned this earlier, but we all in the Highway Patrol do carry Narcan on us. So if something does happen, we have Narcan for us and we have Narcan for the dog. And so that is always present just in case. Like I said, we've done hours and hours of training and hundreds of fines with our current fentanyl dog, and we've had no issues. And I wanted to take 6 months before we train the rest of our dogs to see if everything was good and we were having good results. And we did. So next month we'll be training the rest of the team, another 9 dogs. And we will imprint, we have to replace and get a new canine. So we'll be doing that process. So our entire team will be imprinted and trained and certified on fentanyl.
Representative Conrad.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a quick question, just educational specifically. What does it cost to train a dog?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Conrad. So that can vary from place to place depending on who they use. When we were talking about this dollar amount, if it's just the dog, if you have everything else, the equipment and the vehicle and things like that, if it's just the dog and the training, you're looking at anywhere between $20,000 to $30,000.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So our happy little state employee that comes and checks for bombs in the Capitol didn't come real cheap then. Yeah, I see. Representative Winter.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Gentlemen, thanks for being here. My question is just a minor one, but I'm just curious, is there any breed of dog that's best for this type of work?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Winter, no, not necessarily. The dogs that we've used range from Labradors, which we've used a majority of. We have Belgian Malinois, Springer Spaniels, German Shorthair Pointers. Those are about the 4 that we've focused in on and used and had success with. But there are other dogs out there that you can use as well. Our last few dogs have been labs, and this next one we'll be getting is a lab. We've just had a lot of success and also longevity with those dogs. They last anywhere from 8 to 10 years as long as they don't have any medical issues.
Okay, well, thank you. Thank you for being at our meeting. Further public testimony. Mr. Odekoven, come on up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Byron Odekoven, the Executive Director of the Wyoming Association of Sheriffs and Chiefs of Police, rising in support of the bill. And for a moment of background, if I may, I started out my career as a canine officer. I had a narcotics and apprehension trained German Shepherd working the boom in Gillette, and worked on around 5 different bars downtown on night shift on foot from 7 in the evening till 3 in the morning. So things were a little exciting nonetheless during the boom with a canine, and he was my best friend, partner, and saved us a couple of times documented wise, and we made lots of apprehension. So that is a background which helps me wholeheartedly support the idea of progressing into the area of fentanyl, where we already have success with the other drugs. Unfortunately, we have an overabundance of fentanyl because it's profitable to the cartel to have that come across the border and come into the United States and be a scourge on our community. So I applaud the efforts of our bringer of our bill and the committee for discussing the idea of having a fentanyl-related dog or fentanyl training. As we've already heard from the experts, which I'm proud to say experts, because they are leading the charge in the nation on understanding how to imprint and train either a new dog or an existing dog. When this bill first came out, we collaborated with other sheriffs and chiefs trying to determine if they were readily acceptable, if our process was good, and whether or not this would work out. And I'm here to say that the sheriffs and chiefs wholeheartedly endorse the idea of the Attorney General operating a grant to our local agencies. And I might add that that's somewhat standard practice. The Attorney General routinely obtains federal grants for the assistance of law enforcement, passes it through to the local agencies. So this will be old hat and an easy process, albeit paperwork's never easy, but nonetheless, it will not be a foreign concept, if you will. It'll be something that they routinely know how to do and would know how to process that and track that kind of paperwork for establishment of the grants and go. So having said that, Mr. Chairman, I think it may be best to help answer questions at this point, specifically to fentanyl and the illicit fentanyl that we are trying to find and arrest those who are engaged in that activity. Mr. Chairman.
Questions, committee? Thank you, sir. Oh, we got one?
I got a thumbs up. Sorry, Mr. Chairman. I thought that was a question.
Oh, okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Byron. Any further testimony? Come on up, sir.
Good morning, Chairman Eklund, members of the committee, Lee Livingston, representing Wyoming County Commissioners Association, and we are definitely in support of this. You know, it's a shame we're seeing these drugs pervade every corner of our state. You think we're in a little rural community up there in Park County, but it's there. I guess I do have maybe a couple of questions possibly answered by the good bringer of the bill. One is this, if this is a reimbursable grant, there might be some concern of small community, and maybe it's in the bill and I looked through it, and maybe this is the wrong time to ask that, but some of your smaller communities might not have the upfront funds to make all the purchases and the training. And if it's reimbursable, it might be a problem.
Representative Rodriguez Williams, you can probably answer that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Livingston, I hadn't thought about that. I don't want it to be a deterrence for applicants by any means that don't have the funding up front. So I'd be open to the committee amending the bill to make sure that the funding's there for the agencies in advance.
All right, we can't get that word crafted today. We'll figure it out. We might be able to. Go ahead, Representative Craigo.
Mr. Chairman, I don't think that language is in the bill as drafted, and so I don't think it's in my mind, it's not a concern. It's a grant program. Does not require any matching or reimbursement on behalf of the law enforcement agencies that are listed. So I think we're okay.
Good. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, committee.
Any further testimony? Okay, we'll close. Committee, what's your pleasure?
Let's move the bill.
Been moved by Conrad, seconded by Schlegel. Discussion on the bill. Representative Craigo.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I got some amendments that I would propose, and I will start on page 1, line 12. Between the word any and the word county, insert the word state. On page 3, line 5, strike out the language regarding $300,000 and put in similar language saying $150,000. I believe that was the sponsor's request. And then on page 4, line 2, that 2025 needs to become 2026. Line 10, that 2024 at the very end of the sentence needs to become 2025. Line 14, end of the sentence, 2024 becomes 2025. Line 19, the 2024 becomes 2025. And page 5, line 3, same thing, 2024 becomes 2025. I hope that got them all. If I did not, I apologize. But that would be my motion, Mr. Chairman.
Second.
Moved by Craigo and seconded by Conrad. And if we find any others, I'll go through it with the secretary before when we're done and make sure we clean that up if the committee's okay with that. Any discussion on the amendment? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That amendment passes. While you're here, Representative Rodriguez Williams, do you have anything else to add that we might look into?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would just entertain another amendment idea for the committee. And just per the request of my key witness, Lieutenant Harley, to add anywhere throughout the bill where it states, so examples on page 1, line 2, to fund a fentanyl, insert the word single purpose drug detection canine. And the reason being is there's different types of canines out there, multi-purpose, so they, might be a bomb dog, et cetera. And so this would be for single purpose dogs.
Okay, would they include other drugs that the dogs would be sniffing? Okay, all right. I didn't seem that clear to me. Okay, Representative Craigo.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Just a little bit of discussion on that. I think that language is already in the bill on page 3, lines 5 through 9. It says all grants awarded under this section shall be expended only to purchase and train fentanyl drug detection canines or train existing drug detection canines currently in service to detect fentanyl.
Come on up, Mr. Hardy.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Craigo, I can answer this question. Why we state single purpose is because there's dual purpose dogs. And what that means is a dual purpose dog is doing two things. They can either be doing drugs and tracking or drugs and handler protection. The way the representative wrote this up and her purpose behind this is for fentanyl. If you do a dual purpose, I feel like it's distracting from what she's trying to do in this bill. We're trying to take fentanyl out of the communities. When you add those other things like tracking and handler protection or patrol dogs, those take a lot of time per each dog. So a lot is taken away from the actual purpose of finding fentanyl and narcotics when you add tracking, training, trailing, things like that. So I wanted the focus to be towards what her purpose of this bill is, and that's finding illegal narcotics.
Representative Craigo.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So along those lines, I mean, one thing we haven't really talked about this bill is this is the startup. This is the seed money for the dog, right? This doesn't provide funding for the dog long-term, doesn't provide the overtime pay. Typically, any of our dog handlers around the state get paid more than everybody else because they get overtime because they're taking care of that animal 24/7, right? And so that isn't included in this bill. I mean, that's going to be a cost on our local law enforcement agencies. And so my question to you is, are we sure we want to limit that? If they're able to use one dog for multiple purposes, is that a bad thing? Question.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Craigo, I don't think it's a bad thing. It takes a lot more time for those other purposes of that dog. So it kind of just, we use single purpose dogs. So all of ours are either narcotic trained or explosive trained. We don't use the handler protection. And so the purpose behind it was to not draw the attention away from fentanyl. So they'll spend a majority of their time working on those other disciplines, especially when it comes to a patrol dog. It is beneficial, but again, it would take away from the time that they could spend. My past experience working with other agencies that have these patrol dogs, they spend a lot of time on that portion of the bite work versus the narcotic work. And that's the purpose behind that.
Representative Craigo.
Follow up. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I'm not trying to take away from the purpose of the bill. I'm just thinking down the line, right? I mean, we have a lot of smaller agencies. I think about my sheriff's office back home. If we limit this down to that, are we going to reduce the amount of agencies that want to partake in the program? It seems to me we want to, obviously, the money can only be used at this level for fentanyl training, right? For the detection of fentanyl. But I don't want to limit it to the point where we only have a couple agencies willing to come forward, and because they're the only ones that can afford to have a dog only for this. And I'm not sure. I don't know the statistics. I don't know how all that works. I'm just thinking down the road a ways, next month, month after, between now and the end of 2025, we want to get those dogs into as many locations as possible. I'm not sure it really takes away from the purposes of the good sponsors bill if we leave it a little more open-ended and try not to put those sideboards on.
Would you like to respond?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Craigo, we're fine with withdrawing the term single purpose. I do have one more. If, Mr. Chairman, Representative Craigo, just piggybacking on the discussion of funds being able to be used for equipment and so forth, my hope is that the AG's office would encompass in the grant that they, you can buy a leash, you can buy, use it for veterinary expenses, et cetera. But if the committee feels a need to put some sideboards within the bill, I'm open to that as well. And I think that could probably be done on page 4 under subsection D, when they talk about using the appropriation for administrative expenses. We can insert some language in there. Thank you.
Did you have a follow-up, Representative Craigo? Okay. Representative Davis, you have something?
It was on the other question, Mr. Chairman, but so for lack of any better way to put it, if I got what you were saying correctly, you want to train this dog first to be fentanyl, and then he can always be retrained later in his career to do these other tests. Is that correct?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Davis, that is correct. No, I'm not looking at just fentanyl. Generally, if an agency will do this, they'll use all of those odors, all 5. That would include 5 now. So they would also, it's a different certification for like the tracking and trailing, and then also the patrol side of it. So that's a completely different side and a completely different certification. So this is, I wouldn't say just fentanyl. I would say all the narcotics.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Okay, committee, other questions? Yes, Representative Conrad.
Just a clarifying question, Mr. Chairman, specifically as it relates to the earlier amendments by Representative Craigo, page 1, line 2. I may have missed it, and my apologies if I did. Should we include state within that sentence as well?
Thank you.
I'd make a motion that we'll line, or I'm sorry, for Mark, page 1, the amendment is on lines 2, between county, comma, insert state.
Moved and what? I'm sorry.
Mr.
Representative
Chairman,
Slagle.
I believe Mr. Odekoven has a comment or question he wanted to ask.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Odekoven. I'm thinking that what Representative Craigo was getting at was not putting more sideboards on, but maybe having too many sideboards on to where you'd have departments that would look at this and say, this won't cover the employee, we need to take care of the dog. And I think that's where we're going with some of Mr. Odekoven.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for allowing the indulgence of, once you started working the bill, for a little extra commentary on the points raised. So again, in terms of background, I administered a canine program. We adhered to national standards, and in fact, we led some of the state standards and certifications. Our canine team was used as the certification body, if you will, for a period of time. I think it's important, and as the good lieutenant points out, we're focusing on fentanyl, yes. But in a small agency as well, we have dual purpose dogs. The agency can't afford to have that second or third officer be a canine officer and focus on a dual purpose dog on one hand and a drug only dog to boot, if you will, that second or maybe even third dog. So I think you would be limiting the grant opportunity, especially to the smaller agencies, if you were to say it could not be a dual-purpose dog, or that you weren't going to add that imprint for that dual-purpose dog on the narcotics side. Clearly, the purchase of a new dog, the focus of that dog would be the fentanyl. So the grant is very, very specific, as are other grants that we administer, where you get a piece of the apple, but you don't get to pay for the whole apple with the grant. You get to pay for the piece that you get, but you got to figure out how to fund the rest. And I sense that would how this would work. We would be paying for the fentanyl portion. We'd be securing that car, that cage, the leashes. The administration is how I read it, is the administration of that program involves all of those kinds of things. And you could go on to do on your own time, so to speak, that dual purpose dog. Or you may go to a dual purpose dog class. And you may be able to pay for a portion of that class, the narcotics portion of that class with the grant, but you can't pay for the other portion coming out of the grant. So I think sideboards or limitations may hinder our small agencies' participation, which would be counterintuitive to where we want to be with the grant. And that is the greatest number of fentanyl-trained dogs out across the state for the greatest good. Mr. Chairman, thank you again for allowing the indulgence of a round 2 comment.
Thank you, sir. Questions? All right, so where you stand on this, the bill is probably best where it's at rather than adding any language to it.
Mr. Chairman, on this particular point, yes.
Okay.
The previous amendments, support them.
All right. Representative Davis?
Mr. Chair, I'd like to bring a second amendment to this bill to address the concerns about the upkeep and maintenance of the animal.
Okay.
On page 4, line 5, after use for expenses to administrate upkeep and maintenance of the animal while administrating this act. Does that cover the under the, would that help out?
Would you repeat it?
On line or page 4, line 5, this appropriation provided in this act may be used for expenses to administrate, comma, upkeep and maintenance of the animal while administrating this act in the amount not to exceed 1% of the amount of the appropriation. We need to change the percentage amount while we're in there.
Representative Craigo.
Mr. Chairman, I'm gonna second the motion just for purposes of discussion.
Sure, go ahead. Second. Moved and seconded.
And so, just a little bit of an explanation. This particular subparagraph, section D, is actually relating to the administration of the grant program within the Attorney General's office. So the Attorney General can use 1% of the money to fund a partial position or something. So we don't really want to put your amendment right there. I think if you want to include language, what I would suggest is maybe we could work with the good lieutenant following the meeting and get a floor amendment ready and just say, hey, it can also be, we just put in a new subparagraph D, move that one down, make it E and F, and then renumber and then put one in that says the funding can also be used for incidental expenses of the dog, including blank, blank, and blank, or whatever. I mean, I think that would be the easier way to do it, and we just have a list within the bill.
Okay. Yes, Representative Davis.
Come on, button. With that, then I would need to pull my amendment. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. In a second. All righty. By adding that possible amendment, we would probably reduce the sideboards a bit to where smaller departments might be able to fit into this program better. Okay. We'll work on that probably later. Okay, thank you. Committee, we need to vote so we can get on to the next bill if you're okay with that. All right, roll call, please. Thank you, Representative.
I have a vote for Representative Allemand, but
Aye.
we'll go with Representative Allred.
Aye.
Oh, he's here. Hi. Thank you. Representative Allred,
Aye.
Representative Banks,
Aye.
Representative Conrad. Representative Craigo,
Aye.
Representative Davis,
Aye.
Representative Slagle,
Aye.
Representative Winter. Chairman Eklund,
Aye.
9 ayes, 0 noes, passed with amendments.
Okay, thank you, committee. Good work. The next bill for our consideration is House Bill 168, Innovations in Wyoming Agriculture. And we have lost our representative, but we do have somebody who used to do this. Former Representative Tyler Lindholm, come on up here.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Tyler Lindholm. I'm the State Director for Americans for Prosperity here in the state of Wyoming. And I'm going to do my very best to buy time for Representative Western to hopefully make his way back here. I did text him, Mr. Chairman, so hopefully he's on his way back quickly. Good staff around here, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, Innovations in Agriculture, House Bill 168, comes from kind of a weird situation that shook out just over a couple of years ago. I think we all remember the COVID-19 pandemic and grocery stores in the state of Wyoming. Right here in the state of Wyoming, didn't have any beef for sale. And the reason why they didn't have any beef for sale is how the Federal Meat Inspection Act actually works and how that was implemented over time. Now, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I could bloviate on and on, starting at 1906 through the 1968 amendments and onwards as far as how the Federal Meat Inspection Act works. I'm pretty geeky on it. It's not a brag. That's kind of a disappointment as the hours I've spent reading the Federal Meat Inspection Act and its history. But just the same, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, in large part, we lacked that protein, that good Wyoming protein, because of the Federal Meat Inspection Act. And Congress even recognized that. Congress immediately produced several pieces of legislation during that time period to try and handle that situation. Our own representative and senators from the state of Wyoming co-sponsored that legislation to try and handle that situation. Unfortunately, Congress failed to act. Here we are, 2023, and still no remediation to the Federal Meat Inspection Act and no solutions in sight. And so that's the crux of this issue, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. So that being said, I will turn off my mic and allow the sponsor to.
Yeah, you got her in the nick of time. This man was almost out of words, which I'd never seen before, but go ahead. Oh, this is a possible amendment. Representative Western, when you're ready, you go ahead and proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I apologize. Of course, I thought the dialogue was going on a little further. I could run to the bathroom real quick, and lo and behold, we wrapped it up. But so I present to you House Bill 168. And obviously, it's a pretty darn short bill. We're only at about a page and a half here. And I guess, well, first we'll just kind of walk through the bill and what it does, and then we can kind of discuss the context and why it's here, what it does, and what problem it's solving, Mr. Chairman. So as you can see, it starts right there in Title 35, which of course is what governs our agriculture and ag department. It starts right there in line 13. Any meat processing facility that is licensed as a custom exempt meat processor by the Department of Agriculture may offer any carcass or meat products for retail sale in Wyoming. That's a really important part of this bill, is that on line 2, page 2, that in Wyoming component, because we're just can be confined to us as a state. And then of course it goes on to right there into just line 4 has used this section. Custom exempt meat processor means any licensed facility under the meat inspection program in Title 35 that processes carcasses for meat products pursuant to the exemption under 9 CFR 303.1, then of course the effective date. So that's in little sense what it does is this allows those meat inspection facilities, those custom facilities, to sell to retail customers. Now, just to kind of give you a little bit of a briefing,
there's three basic levels of inspection here in Wyoming. So there's custom exempt, which is kind of that bottom tier. Then it's state inspected. Then it's USDA inspected. Now, obviously, the level of compliance, paperwork, financial burden, et cetera, kind of depends on which one that you're dealing with here. The reality is there's only a handful of some of those USDA inspected or those state inspected facilities in Wyoming. But there are these custom facilities in every single county in Wyoming. I'm sure within each one of our counties where we live, there's one where these local producers, and these local consumers can go to these facilities, and these producers can bring their livestock there, and where consumers potentially, if this bill passes, can come and purchase those products. Of course, with the USDA inspection, that allows you to sell it across state lines, which is a big deal, but there's a lot more compliance and obligation involved in there. And where with the state inspection, you can sell retail just within Wyoming. Again, multiple levels of inspection, obligation, compliance, fees, burdens, those kind of things. So that's what this bill does. And the reason it's here is because ultimately, I think we have to ask ourselves, the Federal Meat Inspection Act, I believe it was passed in 1906, and that has kind of been the guiding document in terms of these types of facilities. Obviously, I think we all know how we feel about some of the large meat packers and how they have adjusted the industry to their liking, regardless of whether this is good or bad for our small producers. Because I think it's those small producers that don't get talked about enough. These family ranches, these family operations all across our state and every one of our counties, that I think are not given their due respect in what they do for providing food to our communities. And I think ultimately the Federal Meat Inspection Act has been chaining them down for over 100 years, for inhibiting their ability, these facilities and our producers, to really reach their full potential and having that local supply meet local demand. I mean, let's go back to COVID, right? There was that entire meat shortage. Because we have these facilities in every county, we could simply say, okay, well, there's a shortage of beef. We can shore that up pretty quickly with the local supply of that from our local ranchers and our local producers. Well, because if for that to be the case, for these custom facilities to be USDA inspected, they'd have to go through all this rigmarole, all the fees, the time to go through all the paperwork. It's really expensive to get that level of certification. And so that's just an example of how we can really empower some of our local producers. So that's kind of I could go on for longer and longer, but I know we've been here a while. So with that, I have any questions. All right, I'm happy to answer questions. Pardon me.
Okay, Representative Davis?
Yes, Mr. Chair. I got a question for you, Representative. With a population of 600,000 in the state, okay, number one, and probably 50% of them already buy a beef and get it processed, it's in the freezer at home, right? So that would be the private sector, right? Okay, when you're going to the state sector and you're going to process it and allow it for sale within the state's borders, is that what you're saying, the retail? So
correct. So right now, for example, I probably should have mentioned that in my remarks, Mr. Chairman. Right now, these exempt facilities, the only way this works is that certainly as a hunter, right, I take my deer, my elk down to one of these facilities, they process it in the order and fashion which I'd like, and then they come back and it's got that sticker that says not for resale, for my consumption and my consumption only on my family and friends. And that's what we're trying to get at here, is to allow those facilities. So again, I know we've got some ag folks on this committee. If we pass this, what it allows you to do is to go to that one of those facilities that's in your county and say, hey, I've got this, I want to take this livestock here, my beef here, and allows basically them to sell that. So that not for sale sticker wouldn't apply in this situation, assuming this bill gets passed.
Follow up.
I fully understand that position, but my question is, what percentage of retail market are you trying to reach out there? So if this does become so I could retail it, roughly there's 300,000 people, or give or take, that don't buy a beef or a hog or a chicken that grow their own products and do have that in their freezer that says not for resale. So where are we trying to go? What market are we trying to reach with altering what's existing?
Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, Representative, I think that there's a lot of untapped demand. I think certainly in the last decade or so, we've kind of seen this movement of trying to buy local, right? The Federal Meat Inspection Act is one of the big roadblocks to really fulfilling that full potential right there. For example, I mean, I think also if I want to buy local, obviously I can go into the ag business and raise it myself, but that's a pretty laborious and expensive way to go about putting beef on my own table. So it leaves the residents of a community the option to work with the local producers they like. If I know there's a rancher down the road and I want to buy his beef directly from him and not have to ship it at the other end of the state to this certain facility, hey, when we know that there's one maybe just 5 miles down the road that there is one of these custom facilities, we can use that option. So right now, that scenario, it's not permissible without this legislation. So there is quite a bit of demand from the local communities. I think whether it's our larger ones, whether it's our rural ones, it removes that barrier from folks being able to do that. I can't give you an exact percentage or number of, out of all the demand, X amount would fit into this category, but I know that there's quite a bit. That I can say.
Okay, one of the legal ways of doing this, going through the custom meat processor, is to have it titled, the animal titled over on the hoof. And if you can find a brand inspector that doesn't get too grumpy about the idea, you can title that animal over to maybe 8 individuals and get it done legally that way, but it's really hard to do that ahead of time. Any further questions? Yes, Representative Conrad.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Western, just a quick question regarding public health and safety. In fact, if there's an outbreak of E. coli based on one of these manufacturers, or if this bill was successful, what are the safeguards for the public and/or recourse to mitigate and/or stop the respective production and/or the slaughter?
Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead.
Representative Conrad, I think that's brings up a really good point. So in these USDA inspected facilities, they have to, these USDA designated facilities, they have to have USDA inspectors. But in our state, and especially in these custom facilities, these are the same people go in and inspect your restaurants to make sure they're compliant with our state code. So it's the exact same people, those same protocols. It just simply says to our Department of Agriculture that our inspectors that we have that are already inspecting these custom exempt facilities, and they're already inspecting all of our restaurants. If this passes, their charge, their mandate remains the exact same. Go out there, make sure we're following our state regulations that we have on the books to ensure that these facilities are compliant, they're clean, and of course, protecting folks who are our consumers.
Okay. Yeah, Representative Craigo.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Western, I just was going to ask you about the proposed amendment while we got you up here. What's the purpose of the proposed amendment?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Craigo, thank you very much. I think that the proposed amendment that you have before you just adds additional strengthening language to ensure that there isn't any interruption, that there is that continuity for the Department of Agriculture and for our inspectors to continue doing their job, inspecting these facilities and make sure they're compliant with our state regulations for these facilities and for consumer protection. It just kind of, I would say, just strengthens that language and strengthens the bill.
Okay, any other questions? Thank you. At this time, I'll bring Mr. Lindholm up if he'd like to add to it, and then we'll have other testimony. Since you got started, come on up here, Tyler.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, thank you very much. I think, and just to kind of close off some of the testimony that I was talking about, is every little community in this state, for the most part, has one of these custom process facilities in it. I mean, that's the big gap that we see, right? Whether it's a USDA inspected facility or a state inspected facility, those are few and far between. We don't have one all of Crook or Weston County in the neck of the woods that I'm from. I don't think we've got one in Niobrara County for that matter either, which means you've got an area roughly the size of Connecticut and Rhode Island, maybe 3 times over, with no ability to provide direct to retail meat. And yet we were out of meat in the grocery store, where 1 mile out of every one of those little towns was beef, but we couldn't serve it. In fact, I would challenge you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, next time you go to a restaurant here in town, ask where your beef came from. Guaranteed it didn't come from Wyoming. And so that's what this is really about. Let's address the elephant in the room, though. Does this violate the Federal Meat Inspection Act? Will this make the USDA exceptionally disappointed in the state of Wyoming? Absolutely, yes. And I suspect that the Department of Agriculture will be able to testify to that much more robustly. But I would also like to point out, and I've got a little bit of a meme saying here, but I think it is exceptionally important to point out what we're talking about here is a 10th Amendment situation. Ultimately, if Colorado can have their pot brownies, surely Wyoming can have their beef tacos. And that's what this is about, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, is when is Wyoming just going to stop pretending that Congress is going to function in a manner that is befitting? I used to work for Senator Lummis. She signed on to every piece of legislation she could to reform the Federal Meat Inspection Act, knowing full well that it needed to be fixed. And yet Congress never took action. The majority leader in the Senate never moved on any of those bills. The Speaker of the House and in Congress never moved on any of those bills. So, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, once again, it comes down to the states. And that's why Americans for Prosperity endorses this legislation and in hopes that you will too. And I'll stand for any questions.
All right. Yeah, Representative Davis.
We've heard all the positive sides of this, but what's going to be the downside if we thumb our nose at the federal government?
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, and Mr. Chairman, and I don't think I can overstate this. Most likely, and Mr. Chairman, you'll remember this. I used to finagle around in the meat law a little bit when I was a former representative, and every once in a while I would get a nasty gram from the USDA. This will be more than that. Unequivocally, the USDA is going to contact the Department of Agriculture. If you pass this into law, the Department of Agriculture will be contacted immediately and told that they're in violation of their memorandum of understanding with the USDA, and they are no longer qualifying for state primacy. And that's what that amendment does, that Representative Western, I believe, handed out, tries to cover that situation. This is, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, this is 100% a challenge to the federal government. And I guess it depends, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, is the USDA holding the cards or not? Or are you? I don't know.
Okay, a little education for the committee. When Tyler was a representative, he kind of led the charge on food freedom, which we had butted our heads up against a brick wall with a lot of the things. We now can sell eggs, probably not legally, but we do. Can sell raw milk, probably not legally, we do, but, and maybe sell out of the garden too at farmers markets and whatnot. So we kind of have broken the law a little bit. This is a bigger deal, I think. Bigger organization that might come down on us, but so
on that
history.
point, Mr. Chairman, Representative Western's legislation and what he's doing is exceptionally bold. I wish I would have been as bold, really, because I had the expectation that maybe the federal government would move the needle, and they have not. People went without good Wyoming protein and good Western protein and good U.S. protein for quite a while, and we're eating things from Brazil and those types of things because of the Federal Meat Inspection Act. It is because of that act.
And some of that meat from way south of us came from this country, was inspected in that country, and then sent back. Their meat processors are down there too. So we're trying to cut through all of the nonsense that happens, but thank you, sir. Mr. Director Miyamoto, would you come up and share with us what challenges you might think we could have? Welcome to our committee, and proceed when you're ready.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, committee. I'm Doug Miyamoto. I'm the director of the Wyoming Department of Agriculture, and with me today I have the manager of our Consumer Health Services Division, Justin Latham. And I appreciate the opportunity to testify. Appreciate the intent that the sponsors are trying to address and bring in the bill. I was able to communicate with the sponsor and supporters about, the position of the Department of Ag and how we're situated. So what I'd like to start with today, Mr. Chairman, if it's all right with you, is to talk a little bit about our relationship with USDA, Food Safety Inspection Service, and kind of how these regulations work for us. We oftentimes do, and I know I've testified in front of this committee before, that the Department of Ag oftentimes feels itself caught in the middle between the federal government and the desires of our state and how we regulate meat. So just put that out there up front. We'll just be very transparent about that. We're trying to carry out our obligations. We're trying to meet the deliverables of our cooperative agreements and our binding documents, while at the same time trying to provide as much flexibility as we can for our producers and support the ag industry. So the way this works is that all meat in the United States obviously is regulated by the Federal Meat Inspection Act. Wyoming, along with 26 other states, have what's known as a state meat inspection program, a state MPI program is what they call that. So about half the states have delegated authority to carry out the provisions of the Federal Meat Inspection Act within the borders of their own state. As has been mentioned by earlier testimony, what that does is it limits what can be done with state inspected meat. That can be sold in retail within the borders of the state that has the program, but it can't go outside the state. So you have these various levels of inspection. Now, there is this cooperative agreement that grants us the delegated authority to run our own state program, and that allows state inspectors to go in. And you'll notice those carcasses that have what's called a state bug. It's a stamp that goes on that carcass that says it's inspected by the state of Wyoming. That little stamp is what tells you whether or not it can go into retail sale, essentially. Now, we're talking specifically about the custom exemption, and that's what's known as our personal use exemption. So what the custom exemption was designed to do was to say, if you're a rancher and you have livestock of your own, you can forego some of the requirements of the Federal Meat Inspection Act, not all of them, but some of those you're exempted from, so you don't have to undergo daily inspection within that plant. And then you can get the product of that animal back for use within your own household for your own personal use. So the amount of inspection that happens under a custom exempt process isn't the same as it is for state inspection or federal inspection. So that's how our delegated authority works. We get our authority from FSIS of USDA. That's the Food Safety Inspection Service of the United States Department of Agriculture. And in return, they give us about $385,000 a year to carry out those inspections and ensure the provisions of the Federal Meat Inspection Act are carried out. What this bill does for our program is it would essentially nullify our cooperative agreement with FSIS. And so we would no longer be able to deliver on what we agreed to in our cooperative agreement, which is carry out the provisions of the Federal Meat Inspection Act. And I think what the unintended consequences are is it would end our state inspection program. So then we would undergo a process with the USDA where it's called designation, and USDA would designate the state of Wyoming for federal inspection. So our inspectors would no longer have any authority to do that work. And then USDA would come in and evaluate all 39 of our plants in Wyoming that currently do this business of custom exempt processing. And they would evaluate those. That evaluation takes quite a bit of time in our experience from other states that have been designated for federal inspection. I'm told between 6 and 9 months. Obviously, this isn't a process that we've undergone before, so I can't speak to the specifics about how that would work, but I think the unintended consequences are we would lose our ability to inspect those custom exempt operators today, and they might be left holding the bag of, now what do I do with my business? I'll just leave it at that, Mr. Chairman, and I'm happy to answer any questions that the committee may have.
Committee questions? Representative Alderman.
You just stated, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Miyamoto. Thank you. Why would the USDA come in and evaluate our plants? Because it looks to me like they no longer have anything to do with them.
Mr. Chairman, and Representative, as has been mentioned, you have various levels of inspection. And so once we would be out of compliance with our cooperative agreement and would no longer have delegated authority to carry out that federal act in the state of Wyoming, everybody would have to either come under federal inspection or they themselves would be out of compliance with the Federal Meat Inspection Act. So essentially, it puts us in this no man's land.
Representative Alderman, follow up.
Follow up. I don't remember the number of cattle that would represent one McDonald's hamburger, but it was a bunch. And it looks to me like if we did this, it would be one cow in our hamburger and not cattle from Brazil and Argentina and everywhere else. Looks to me like this is also a lot safer meat for the people of Wyoming. Thank you.
Okay, Representative Schlegel.
Mr. Miyamoto, my question is how much of this beef that's butchered in our federally inspected plants stays in the state and how much of it actually goes out? Do you have any idea on that?
Mr. Chairman, Representative, I don't have any statistics about the destination where those products end up, but would remind that those products that fall under state inspection and not federal inspection, they're limited to the state of Wyoming. So if you're a producer and you want to sell your product in the state of Wyoming, you want to sell that locally, there's a process by which you can get that done, and it has to go through a plant that has state inspection and gets that state stamp on it, and then that's eligible to go to retail in any store or restaurant, whatever, in the state of Wyoming now.
There's also a process that the producer has to go through with the Department of Ag in order to retail the state inspected meat or not.
Mr. Chairman, no, the facility is the one that's licensed.
Okay. What? Follow up.
Yeah, the follow-up to this, Mr. Chairman, the follow-up to this question would be, so are the inspectors that do the federal inspections the same ones that do the state inspections, or are they actually different personnel?
Mr. Chairman, Representative, that's a good question. They're completely different personnel. So in a federal plant, those are USDA employees, and they're the ones that have, a USDA inspected stamp in their hands. Our inspectors have a Wyoming Department of Agriculture stamp in their hands, and that's what differentiates where that meat can be sold. So completely different process.
Thank you.
Okay. Other questions? Representative Davis.
Mr. Chair, you say there's 39 plants in Wyoming that are USDA inspectable, or there's 39 plants that you inspect?
Mr. Chairman, Representative, what I meant to say, and I don't know exactly what I did say, but it's 39 plants that are inspected by the Wyoming Department of Agriculture that do custom exempt processing. So they would be the ones that are subject to the outcome of this bill. If the state of Wyoming loses its delegated authority to carry out the federal act in the state of Wyoming, those 39 would be the ones that would no longer have inspection services available to them.
Do you know, follow-up, Mr. Chairman?
Yeah, follow up.
Do you know how many USDA plants there are in the state of Wyoming, by chance?
Mr. Chairman, Representative, his answer was what I thought, and it's 11 plants. And there's a little nuance I would add to this as well. that's relevant to the federal inspection, state inspection dynamic in the state of Wyoming, and that's when it comes to species such as buffalo. Those are non-amenable species, and Justin has some information about how our agreement with those animals happened, because that would also be impacted by this bill. So if it's all right with you, Mr. Chairman, just real quick, he has some information about how that works versus the federal process.
Sure. Go ahead when you're ready. You have to push the right
Mr.
spot.
Chairman, members of the committee, thank you for your time today. Yes, non-amenable species such as bison or buffalo are allowed to be slaughtered and processed under state inspection. Because they're a non-amenable species and they're not domestic, it allows us to put that state bug, as the director spoke of, and those can cross state lines. We do have several facilities throughout the state that do process bison, yak, and other non-amenable species, but one in particular that is their total book of business. They do several $1 million in sales a year, and under the state inspection program, the real benefit there is we don't charge for that voluntary inspection, but if they were to have a federal inspector come in and monitor their processes, they would have to pay for that. Hourly rate for that, just the baseline rate, is roughly or approximately $67 for that facility. So it'd be a bit of a financial burden for them.
Representative Winder?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director Miyamoto, it looks to me like this is a perfect situation in which the state of Wyoming can make a statement relative to what the federal government is doing to us, not only with meat inspection, but just everything else they're trying to push over on us. So I think it depends on what the governor ultimately decides if he'll sign this bill, but it looks to me like we need to endorse this effort. And I hope it wouldn't take anything away from your agency, but at this time, I think we need to stand up and promote this. So if you have any alternate thoughts, why, please go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, Representative, I don't want to go too far down the path of offering too much opinion on the matter today, but what I would tell you is this: I think the unintended consequence, the potential is that we lose our state program, so there isn't anybody to go into those custom exempt plants that are currently inspected, the 39 that we talked about, and they don't have inspection from the Wyoming Department of Agriculture anymore. And so there isn't a process whereby they can, from a federal standpoint, legally participate in commerce at that point. So it puts them in a position where they're left holding the bag of, now what do I do that I don't have an inspector? I'm not technically licensed to do this process anymore because there's no inspector coming in. And so where does that leave me from a legal standpoint? And I'm not an attorney, but those are the kinds of things that I have to consider as impacts to our department from legislation and the customers that we serve.
Follow up.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a follow-up question to your colleague there. You mentioned that, if I understood correctly, that the slaughter of and production of meat from buffalo is not affected by the federales, if you will. But they can go ahead and do that, and they can sell it across state lines. Is that correct?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Winters, that is not correct. They still fall under the Federal Meat Inspection Act. It falls under voluntary inspection, so it's still part of that process. They still have a HACCP plan and a food safety plan to ensure and traceability, both trace forward and trace back. And that's why it's allowed to cross state lines for states that are willing to accept that product. A lot of that product goes to New York and other places.
Follow up.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So isn't that something that we should be concerned about, wherein they can move with the buffalo and it has no, we can't move forward with our issues relative to livestock. Isn't that it just seems to me that it's not on the same plane.
Mr. Chairman, Representative, there's been a lot of states. I mentioned there's 27 states that have their own meat inspection program. And I think all of us over the past several decades have been trying to influence Congress in a direction that would say if the meat is equal to, in terms of food safety, to the federally inspected meat, then it should be allowed to cross state lines. And so that's an ongoing effort amongst many of the states. And there's some existing policy within our national organization of state departments of agriculture that have advocated for the allowance of state inspected product to enter retail on an interstate basis. So it's a valid point that you raise that, because buffalo is a non-amenable species and you do have to have an agreement from the accepting state that they want that product. And then at that point, state inspection is good enough for interstate commerce. That's kind of the same basis under which we've been trying to influence powers that be to allow state inspected product to be eligible for interstate commerce as well. It's a direction we're working on.
Representative Schlegel.
Question for you, Director. So I'm not sure I totally understood. Does the state not have any meat inspectors, or all the meat inspectors in the state federal inspectors? I wasn't clear on that statement.
Mr. Chairman, Representative, we have both categories of inspectors in the state of Wyoming. We have state of Wyoming meat inspectors that serve as state inspected plants. And then we have 11 federally inspected plants that have federal inspectors in those facilities.
Representative Banks?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. My first question is, have you reached out to any of these custom exempt plants? Because when I have, everyone that I've called and spoken with has been in support of this. And they're not worried about, well, say we go back 2 years, we don't have any beef, we don't have any meat. They're not worried about federal inspectors and they're not worried about a food stamp on the beef. They're worried about feeding the people in their community. And when it comes down to it, are we going to take the side of a bureaucracy over making sure that our people are being fed? My question.
Mr. Chairman, Representative, we as the department follow the wishes of the legislative body, and we try to maintain compliance with our federal agreements as well. I appreciate the concern over the bureaucracy. We suffer frustrations at our level as well.
Okay, Representative Davis?
Mr. Chair, I probably will vote not to send this bill out of committee because I feel if I understand what you said, Director, if we lose this, we lose 39 plants in Wyoming because they will no longer be able to operate without inspection or oversight. Is that correct?
Mr. Chairman, Representative, if they intend to follow federal law, that's correct.
But they could continue to operate, they just wouldn't have the protection of the meat inspection that the State Department of Agriculture offers through an MOU with the Department or the USDA.
Mr. Chairman, that's correct. I understand that there's penalty provisions of the Federal Meat Inspection Act. Those wouldn't be carried out by us at the Department of Agriculture. That would be the purview of the USDA.
Okay. Representative Allred.
I'm a little concerned about the unintended consequences. So if we move this bill, you talked about the agreement that so many states have to have our own inspections. Would we lose the ability to have our own inspectors in the state.
Mr. Chairman, Representative, yes.
Okay, Representative Conrad, no? Okay, how many, I've got a question here. How many in the last, maybe since COVID, we really ramped things up between the Business Council, the Department of Ag, and the work you've done? How many plants have we stood up? Not just custom, but others as well, USDA as well.
Mr. Chairman, I'm told that we had an increase of 7.
Total.
Yeah, so I think, we've had about a 20% increase in 7 new plants, but I would say that our capacity increased much more than that because most of our applicants were existing licensed operators that applied for additional capacity within existing plants. So I don't think that's indicative of the amount of increase in production that we got through those grant programs. I think it's higher than that, but we did bring on 7 brand new plants. That was tough because the timeline was so tight.
Yeah. Okay, I would have guessed more, but because most of them are right in my area, I think that leaves the rest of the state kind of sparse. Okay, any other questions? Well, we've got the director and his staff here. All right, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, committee.
Yeah, thank you for coming. Further testimony. Okay, oh my goodness. We're running out of time, Ken. You'll be brief.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, I understand the time constraints. Ken Hamilton with Wyoming Farm Bureau Federation. Mr. Chairman, most of what I've heard here today, I agree with. The big challenge I think we have is that we call it a bump, but it's a wall. It's the USDA wall. And we are playing chicken here with a pretty big piece of equipment coming down the road. While I fully support us telling the federal government to stuff it, right now we don't have the capacity that we need to take care of our current individuals out there. I know of several of our members that are trying to sell lambs. Those custom exempt processors that are available are charging more than the price of the lamb to process it. So we've got some issues there that we need to address. Unfortunately, the big one in the room, as the former testimony said, was USDA. And I'm afraid that if we go down this path, if we win, we're out ahead. If we lose, we've lost a lot in the state of Wyoming. We've talked to some of our custom exempt people, and they say some of the stuff that we've done in food freedom has made it difficult for us. And we've supported our organization supported a lot of food freedom bills. And we still believe that that's the correct way to go. Our organization has really supported the federal legislation to try and fix the meat processing issue. I'm afraid, though, that in this particular case, we might end up in a situation where we could have worse situations than we currently have, and we would take off the market a lot of those processors that our current members rely on in order to move the beef. So thank you, Mr. Chairman. Happy to answer any questions.
Questions, committee. Thank you, sir. I believe we're finished with testimony. We'll close it. Committee, what's your pleasure?
Move the bill.
Been moved by who? Conrad and Banks, second. Discussion on the bill. Representative Conrad.
Mr. Chairman, I'll begin. Thank you, Representative Allred. I would just share with you guys some serious concerns as it relates to the bill. As a former technical manager of a manufacturer who did produce food grade sodium bicarbonate specifically for the use and additionally within hemodialysis, and as the author and program manager for HACCP programs, I have some very, very serious concerns, but in the spirit of this bill to get a larger perspective, I will be voting aye, but I will share with you full transparency. There's many, many concerns. Thank you.
Representative Allred. I'm sorry, Alleman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I look at this as a great bill. It is one that will bring Wyoming a little bit of sovereignty. And the next COVID, our grocery stores will not be empty. We'll have meat, and if we do this with other products, we'll have other products. I'm very much in favor of this bill, and thank you.
Okay. Question being called on the bill. All those, I guess we'll have a roll call. Oh, well, you called question on the bill, so we have an amendment. Did we want to consider this? Okay, the amendment's been moved. You have it, Mark? Will? Been moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Amendment passes. Yeah, I'll say something. I was involved in trying to get all these processing plants started, and I have concerns about turning them into pawns in a chess game. It's going to be like a big match of chicken. So I'll probably be a no on this, but I understand the spirit of it, and we can try it, but we are really messing with some little plants. I think we're ready to vote.
Representative Allemand.
Aye.
Representative Allred.
Aye.
Representative Banks.
Aye.
Representative Conrad.
Aye.
Representative Crago.
No.
Representative Davis.
No.
Representative Slagle.
Aye.
Representative Winter.
Aye.
Chairman Eklund.
No.
6 aye, 3 no. This passes with amendments.
We are adjourned.